Hello everybody, my name is Walter and this is episode 34 of my Redstone Commands Series. In this episode I want to cover the spreadplayers command. Now the spreadplayers command is closely related to the teleport command, with the main difference being that you don't specify a very specific point where everyone lands at. Instead you specify an area and then the command distributes the entities on top of that area. The name is also a bit misleading insofar that it also works for all other entities and not only players. So this command could be rather useful if you, for example, have a maze and you don't want to make a new maze every time you play the maze or have players inside of the maze. Instead, you use this command to distribute them randomly, and then they have to find a way out from a point that's different than the last time. Or if you are building an adventure map with a dungeon, for example, and you want the enemies to appear somewhat randomized around the player. That's where this command might come into use. One thing to keep in mind here is this command doesn't use a uniform distribution, it uses a Gaussian distribution, which means that the closer to the center of the area you are, the higher the likelihood is that a point is actually selected as a landing point. So players will be grouped a bit, or entities will be grouped a bit closer to the center than to the edge. Doesn't make much of a difference for small ranges, but for bigger ranges it can occur, or can be a bit obvious. Now with that said, let's actually get to the syntax. As usual, we start with the name of the command spreadplayers. Then we deviate a bit from the usual case and start with the area where we want to distribute the entities on top of. Here we start with the center of that area, but only the X and the Z coordinate. We don't need the Y coordinate because the entities are distributed on the surface of that area. So basically they are virtually dropped from the top of the world down until they hit the first non-liquid block or solid block. And that's then defined as their landing point. Subsequently, we don't need to specify a Y coordinate. There's a way to override that a bit, as you will see in a moment, but that's the usual case. After that, you define how far you want the entities to be distanced from each other. So you define a minimum distance between the landing points. Again, just horizontal. And after that, you define how big the area as a total is via a maximum distance to the center. So basically the distance between the center and the edge of that area. Following that, you have the option to define a maximum height limit by starting with the word under, and then you define a Y coordinate. That overrides the dropping the entities from the top of the world. Now they are essentially dropped from that Y coordinate. So you can use this to force the entities underground. For example, if you have your maze with a roof, and then you can use this to make sure that they land inside of the maze and not on top of the roof of the maze. After that, you can define whether you want to keep teams together, which happens is basically when you set this to true, that the players of one team will all land at the same landing point, and players of a different team will land all at the same but different landing point, and so on. And then finally, we actually define who is being teleported. This can be pretty much anything that is allowed for entity description. So you can use player names, you can use unique identifier, you can use target selectors. And with that, let's actually get to the examples. And for that, I prepared this little set of platforms here with 6 armor stands in total, which I will now start to distribute via the spreadplayers command. So let's get started. So the first command I want to use here is spreadplayers, centered around the center of the platform at the bottom. I'm using 1 meter as a minimum distance and 2 meters as the range of the area, which means this is a very close grouping. The armor stands in this case will be very close to each other. I am not looking at teams, so they will be distributed uniquely. Everyone will get their own landing point, and I'm doing this for all armor stands within 15 meters. So in this case, those 6 here. And let's do this, and you can see they will all land within the 2 meters of the center. They are also landing on the center of the blocks, have also randomized orientation, not only position. and will land on the surface. As you can see, they don't land here at the same height as the other ones. They land on the highest solid block. And I can do this a few more times, and you can see they may even land occasionally on the top one there. And if you are landing on top of a sign, you actually land on top of the sign. So it's really looking for the first non-liquid block, and the sign actually apparently counts. So be aware of that. Now we are changing just the ranges a bit. Now we want to have at least 3 meters in between and a maximum range of 5. And if we do this, you can see they actually land on the balcony I'm on. But what they won't do is land on a non-valid surface. So wherever void is below or where only lava is below or something like that, they will not land. This is to make sure that the players don't die at the moment they are teleported, just to be safe. So that's the distances. Now let's have a look at the under option. So I have 3 platforms here. This platform is at Y level 72, and this is at Y level 74. And now we are just going to step through a few possible under options just to show you how they work. So let's start with the lowest, Y level 72. And you can see right away, this doesn't disallow the blocks of Y level 72, but those of 74. I can do this a few more times, but every time they will essentially land at most on top of this platform, but not this one here. Same for Y level under 37. You can see this one here landed below this platform, not on top of the platform. And if I go for Y level 74, now they will actually be able to land on that one here. So this defines the lowest level of blocks you can actually land on. Yeah. For a given meaning of the word landing. So, and final example, here I'm going with intermediate grouping, and I'm setting the respect team to true. And now something strange happens. All of the players or all of the armor stands are teleported to 1. I tried this even with putting them in different teams. For some reason, all of them were teleported into the same point. I'm not entirely sure why that happens. I suspect this is something that only really works with players and not other entities. So that might be the case. I'm not 100% sure about that. And with that, we have reached the end of this episode about the spread players command. I hope you enjoyed it, and well, see ya.